I was 37 years old when my husband died, and it took my family exactly 9 days to kick me out of the house we built together. 9 days. Not even 2 full weeks to grieve before my brother-in-law showed up at my door with a moving truck and told me I needed to leave because they couldn't afford an extra mouth to feed. The house wasn't even theirs. It was mine and David's. But when you're drowning in grief and your entire support system turns their back on you, you don't think clearly. You just survive. David and I had been married for 14 years when a heart attack took him. No warning. No goodbye. He kissed me on a Tuesday morning before heading to his construction site, told me he'd be home by 6 for the pasta I was planning to make, and by 3 in the afternoon, I was identifying his body at County General Hospital. The doctors said it was massive, instantaneous, that he didn't suffer. I've replayed that morning 1,000 times, searching for signs I missed, some indication that the man I loved was about to vanish from my life forever. There was nothing. Just a normal Tuesday that ended with my world shattering into pieces I'm still trying to put back together. We lived in a modest 3-bedroom house in Riverside, a working-class neighborhood where everyone knew everyone, where kids played street hockey until the streetlights came on, where David had coached Little League every spring for the past 6 years, even though we never had children of our own. We tried. God knows we tried. 3 rounds of IVF, 2 miscarriages, and eventually the quiet acceptance that maybe it just wasn't meant to be. But we had each other, and that was enough. David worked construction, I managed the front office at a dental practice downtown, and together we built a life that was simple, but ours. The house was paid off. David had insisted on that, putting every extra dollar toward the mortgage, so we'd own it free and clear before we were 40. He made it by 2 years. If you're connecting with this story and want to hear more real-life experiences like this, please hit that subscribe button. We're working toward 1,000 subscribers, and your support means everything to this channel. Just one click on that red button below, and you're part of this community. The funeral was on a Saturday. My family, David's family, neighbors, people from his work, they all showed up. My mother wore black and cried loudly in the front row. My father stood stoic and silent, the way he always did when emotions made him uncomfortable. My younger sister Amanda hugged me and whispered that everything would be okay, that I wasn't alone. My brother Tom and his wife Jennifer brought a casserole and assured me they'd be there for whatever I needed. David's brother Marcus gave the eulogy, talking about brotherhood and loss and how David had been the best man he'd ever known. Everyone said the right things. Everyone performed grief perfectly, and I believed them. The first crack appeared 3 days after the funeral. I was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at a stack of sympathy cards I couldn't bring myself to open, when my mother called. She didn't ask how I was doing. She didn't offer comfort. Instead, she launched into a monologue about practicality and financial reality. "Sweetheart," she said, her voice taking on that tone she used when she was about to say something she knew I wouldn't like. "Your father and I have been talking, and we think you need to make some difficult decisions about the house. It's too much for you now. The property taxes, the maintenance, the memories. You should sell it, move into something smaller, maybe get a roommate or move back home for a while until you figure things out." I remember the exact moment I realized what she was really saying. Move back home. At 37. After 14 years of marriage, after building a life with someone, after losing everything, the solution was to retreat to my childhood bedroom like I was 18 again and had just broken up with my high school boyfriend. I told her I needed time to think, that I wasn't making any major decisions while I was still in shock. She sighed, that disappointed sigh that had haunted my entire childhood whenever I didn't do exactly what she wanted, and said, "Just don't wait too long. You can't afford to be sentimental right now." But it was Tom who really blindsided me. My brother, the one who'd taught me to ride a bike, who'd threatened to beat up anyone who was mean to me in middle school, who'd stood beside David at our wedding and told him he better take care of his little sister. He showed up at my house on a Thursday evening, 8 days after the funeral, with Jennifer beside him looking uncomfortable. I made coffee. We sat in the living room where David and I used to watch movies on Friday nights. And Tom told me, in the most matter-of-fact voice imaginable, that they discussed it as a family, and everyone agreed it would be best if I moved out of the house. Your subscription really does make a difference. If you're finding value in this story, take a second right now to click that subscribe button. We're so close to hitting 1,000 subscribers, and each person who joins helps us reach that goal. Don't wait. Subscribe now and be part of this journey with us. I actually laughed. It was such an absurd statement that my brain couldn't process it as serious. Move out of my house. I said, Tom, this is my house. Mine and David's. We paid for it. Our names are on the deed. He exchanged a look with Jennifer, and that's when I knew this wasn't a casual suggestion. This was planned, rehearsed. Actually, Jennifer said, speaking for the first time, David's name is on the deed. And now that he's gone, there are questions about whether you can actually afford to keep it. We're just trying to help you face reality before you end up in foreclosure. I felt like I'd been slapped. These were people who'd eaten at my table, who I'd hosted for Thanksgiving and Christmas, who'd borrowed money from us when Tom's business was struggling 3 years ago, money we never asked them to pay back. And now they were sitting in my living room, telling me I couldn't afford my own home, that I needed to leave. Where exactly do you expect me to go? I asked, my voice colder than I'd ever used with my brother. Tom shrugged. There are apartments. You could downsize significantly. Or, like Mom said, you could stay with them for a while. The point is, this house is too much for one person, especially someone in your situation. Someone in my situation. A widow. That's what he meant but wouldn't say. Someone whose value had been tied to her husband, and now that he was gone, I was deadweight. An extra mouth to feed, though I'd been supporting myself since I was 22 and had never asked my family for a dime. The coffee I'd made sat untouched as Tom continued, explaining that they'd already talked to a real estate agent, that the market was good, that I could probably get a decent price if I moved quickly. He had it all figured out. They all did. My entire family had gathered together, without me, and decided my future. I asked them to leave. Tom looked almost relieved, like he'd been dreading this conversation, and was glad it was over. Jennifer touched my arm on her way out, a gesture that was probably meant to be comforting but felt condescending. We're just looking out for you, she said. I didn't respond. I closed the door behind them and stood in the entryway of the house David and I had chosen together, had painted together, had made love in and fought in and dreamed in, and I felt more alone than I had even in the moments after learning he was dead. The next day, Marcus showed up. David's brother, the one who'd given that beautiful eulogy about brotherhood and loyalty. He didn't bother with coffee or pleasantries. He stood on my porch and told me that David's family had been discussing the situation, and they felt it was inappropriate for me to keep living in a house that represented their brother's legacy when I clearly couldn't maintain it properly. The lawn hadn't been mowed in 2 weeks. There were sympathy flowers dying on the porch. The place was falling apart, he said, and it was disrespectful to David's memory. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. It really helps us grow and reach that goal of 1,000 subscribers. Your support is what keeps these stories coming, so click that button and join our community. It takes just a second, and it means the world. I looked at this man, this person who shared David's DNA, but apparently none of his character, and asked him if he was seriously criticizing me for not mowing the lawn 2 weeks after burying my husband. He had the decency to look slightly ashamed, but he didn't back down. We're prepared to make you an offer for the house, he said. Below market value, obviously, since you'd be saving on realtor fees and closing costs. It would give you a clean break, a chance to start over somewhere else. Somewhere more appropriate for a single woman. That phrase. More appropriate for a single woman. Like I was a Victorian spinster who needed to be tucked away somewhere out of sight. Like the life I'd built for 14 years had been erased the moment David's heart stopped beating. I told Marcus to get off my property. He left, but not before mentioning that if I didn't accept their help, I'd end up losing everything anyway, and wouldn't that be a shame after everything David worked for? That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked through the house, touching things David had touched, sitting in his chair, pulling on one of his old t-shirts that still smelled faintly of his cologne and sawdust. I thought about the life we'd planned. We were going to travel when we retired. Italy first, then Greece, maybe rent a villa in Tuscany for a month, and just exist without schedules or obligations. We were going to get old together, sitting on this very porch, watching the neighborhood kids grow up, being the cool elderly couple who gave out full-size candy bars on Halloween. All of that was gone, but the house remained. This physical space that held every memory, every laugh, every ordinary moment that becomes precious only after you realize you'll never have another one. And my family, the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally, wanted to take that away too. Because it was inconvenient. Because I was inconvenient. An extra mouth to feed, though I'd been feeding myself just fine. Thank you very much. I'd already gone back to work at the dental practice. Dr. Morrison had been incredibly understanding, told me to take whatever time I needed, but sitting at home drowning in grief was worse than the distraction of work. I was managing. I was surviving. But that wasn't good enough for them. They wanted me packaged up and relocated, problem solved, onto the next family crisis. Please hit subscribe if you're enjoying this. We're aiming for 1,000 subscribers, and you can help us get there. It's free, it's quick, and it makes a huge difference to the channel. Just click that red subscribe button right now. The final blow came on day 9. I came home from work to find Tom, Marcus, Jennifer, and my parents sitting in my driveway. Not in the house, because at least they'd respected the locked door, but they're waiting for me, with a moving truck parked on the street. Tom got out of his car and approached me before I could even turn off my engine. "We've made arrangements," he said. "We found you an apartment. 1 bedroom, affordable, close to your work. We'll help you move this weekend. The real estate agent is coming Monday to list the house." I got out of my car slowly, buying myself time to process what was happening. They hadn't asked. They decided. Found me an apartment, made arrangements, brought a moving truck. "Get off my property," I said, my voice shaking not with sadness but with rage. "All of you, get out." My mother started crying. "Sweetie, we're trying to help you. You're not thinking clearly. You're going to make terrible decisions if we don't step in." My father, speaking for the first time, said, "Don't be dramatic, Claire. We're family. We're doing what's best for you. What's best for me." They decided what was best for me without asking what I wanted, what I needed, what I was capable of handling. They'd reduced me to a problem that needed solving, a burden that needed lifting. And the worst part, the part that made me physically sick, was the realization that this wasn't about concern. This was about control. This was about my family, my husband's family, looking at a house that was paid off, that had equity, that represented financial security, and deciding they knew better how it should be used. I didn't move that weekend. I called a lawyer instead. A family law attorney named Patricia Hernandez, who came highly recommended and who listened to my story with increasing outrage. She reviewed the deed, confirmed what I already knew. The house was mine, jointly owned with David, and now solely mine as his widow. My family had no legal claim. None. What they were doing bordered on harassment. She drafted cease and desist letters to every family member who'd been pressuring me, making it clear that any further attempts to force me from my home would result in legal action. Your subscription really matters. Click that button if you want to see more stories like this and help us reach 1,000 subscribers. Be part of our growing community by subscribing right now. The letters went out on a Monday. By Tuesday, my phone was exploding with outraged messages. How dare I involve lawyers? How dare I threaten my own family? How dare I be so ungrateful when they were only trying to help? My mother called me selfish and cruel. Tom said I'd regret this, that I was burning bridges I'd need someday. Marcus sent a text message calling me a gold digger, which would have been funny if it wasn't so insulting considering I'd been with his brother since we were 23 and dirt poor. Amanda, who'd been silent through all of this, finally reached out to say she understood why I was upset but thought I was overreacting, that family was forever, and I should try to forgive. I blocked all of them. Every single one. Changed my locks. Installed a security camera system. And started rebuilding my life from the ground up. The first few months were brutal. Grief doesn't follow a schedule, and there were days I could barely get out of bed, days where I'd hear a noise and turn to tell David about it before remembering he wasn't there. But I went to work. I paid my bills. I maintained my house. I proved to myself, if no one else, that I was capable of surviving without them. I also started paying attention to my finances in a way I never had before. David had handled most of the investment decisions, but he taught me enough that I wasn't starting from zero. We had savings. We had David's life insurance policy, which was substantial. We had investment accounts that I now controlled. I wasn't rich, but I wasn't destitute either. I was, in fact, significantly more financially secure than I'd realized. And with the house paid off, my cost of living was remarkably low. I started thinking about what to do with the resources I had, how to honor David's memory by building something rather than just surviving. That's when I started researching real estate investment. David's construction background meant I understood property and renovation costs better than most people. I knew how to assess a building's condition, what repairs were critical versus cosmetic, how to budget for improvements. I started attending local real estate investment meetings, taking online courses, learning about property management and tenant law. It became an obsession in a good way, a focus that helped me process grief while building toward something concrete. If this story is resonating with you, please subscribe to help us hit that 1,000 subscriber milestone. Your subscription is quick, free, and incredibly appreciated. Click that subscribe button now and be part of what we're building here. 6 months after David died, I bought my first investment property, a small duplex that needed work but had good bones. I hired contractors I trusted, people David had worked with, and we renovated it into a beautiful rental property. I found excellent tenants, learned the business, made mistakes, and corrected them. It felt good, purposeful, like I was taking control of my life instead of letting circumstances control me. I bought a second property 3 months later, then a third. I was strategic, careful, never overextending myself, but always looking for the next opportunity. I learned quickly, and I discovered I was good at this. Really good. The business grew faster than I'd anticipated, and within 2 years of David's death, I owned 7 rental properties and had built a reputation as a fair but firm landlord who maintained her buildings well and chose her tenants carefully. I'd had zero contact with my family during this time. None of them reached out to apologize. None of them acknowledged that they'd been wrong to try to force me from my home. Radio silence, which was fine. I didn't need them. I'd built a life without them. A life that was different from what I'd planned with David, but was mine nonetheless. I'd made friends in the real estate investment community, found a grief support group that actually helped, started seeing a therapist who specialized in traumatic loss. I was okay. More than okay. I was thriving. Then I heard through a mutual acquaintance that my family was having financial troubles. Tom's business, which had been struggling for years, had finally failed. He'd declared bankruptcy and had to sell his house. He, Jennifer, and their 2 kids had moved into a rental property, a 3-bedroom apartment in a converted warehouse building on the east side of Riverside. My parents, who'd been living in the same house for 35 years, had decided to downsize now that they were fully retired. They'd sold their home and moved into a 2-bedroom unit in the same building as Tom. Amanda and her husband Rick, who'd been living in a different state, had moved back to Riverside after Rick lost his job, and they'd also ended up in that building. Even Marcus, who apparently had his own financial issues I wasn't aware of, had moved into a unit there. Subscribe now if you're enjoying this story. We're working toward 1,000 subscribers, and every single subscription helps. Click that button and join our community of listeners who appreciate real-life experiences. My entire family, minus me, was living in the same apartment building. A building called Riverside Commons. A building I'd never paid much attention to because it wasn't in the area where I usually invested. But once I knew my family was there, I became curious. I did some research. Riverside Commons was a decent building, nothing fancy but well-maintained, in an okay neighborhood. It had been owned by an elderly couple, the Johnsons, who'd built it 40 years ago and had managed it themselves until recently. Word on the real estate investor grapevine was that they wanted to sell. They were in their 80s, tired of property management, ready to retire to Florida and let someone else deal with tenant complaints and maintenance issues. I reached out to their real estate agent, made an offer. The building had 24 units, was at 90% occupancy, had solid bones, but needed some cosmetic updating. The Johnsons wanted to move fast, and my offer was cash, no contingencies, quick closing. We closed the deal in 30 days. I became the owner of Riverside Commons on a Wednesday in March, 2 years and 7 months after my husband died. 2 years and 7 months after my family tried to kick me out of my home because I was an extra mouth to feed. I didn't tell them immediately. I wanted to review the building's financials first, assess the current rent roll, understand what I was working with. What I discovered was interesting. The Johnsons had been charging below market rent for years, partly because they were nice people who didn't want to gouge their tenants, partly because they hadn't kept up with market rates. Every unit in the building was paying significantly less than comparable apartments in the area. My family, it turned out, was getting a very good deal. Tom's 3-bedroom was $1,200 a month when similar units in the neighborhood went for $2,500. My parents' 2-bedroom was $900 when it should have been $1,800. Across the board, every tenant was underpaying by current market standards. As the new owner, I had options. I could continue the Johnsons' approach, keep rents low, be the nice landlord who valued stable tenants over maximum profit. Or I could bring the rents in line with market rates, which was not only legal but expected in a business context. I spent a week thinking about it. This wasn't about revenge. This was about business. But it was also about justice. About showing my family exactly what it felt like to be treated as inconvenient, as disposable, as less important than financial considerations. If you're still with me on this story, show your support by subscribing. We're so close to 1,000 subscribers, and you can help us reach that goal. Just one click on that subscribe button. Do it right now. I sent the letters out on a Monday. Standard notice of rent increase letters, perfectly legal, giving 60 days notice as required by state law. Every tenant in Riverside Commons received one. The new rents were set at market rate, which meant for most tenants, including my family, an increase of anywhere from 50 to 100%. It was a shock, certainly, but it was also fair market value for what they were getting. I wasn't price gouging. I was charging what every other landlord in the area charged. Tom called me within an hour of receiving his letter. I'd unblocked their numbers the week before, anticipating this. "Claire," he said, his voice uncertain, like he wasn't sure I'd answer. "It's Tom. We received a rent increase notice today. The new owner of our building is listed as CE Properties LLC. That's not. Is that you?" I let the silence hang for a moment before responding. "Yes," I said simply. "That's my company. I bought Riverside Commons last month." The explosion of anger and disbelief that followed was almost comical. How could I do this to family? How could I be so vindictive? How could I raise their rent when I knew they were struggling? I listened quietly, letting him vent, and when he finally ran out of steam, I said, "Tom, I'm charging market rate. This is what apartments in this neighborhood cost. The previous owners were giving you a discount. I'm running a business, not a charity." "But we're family," he shouted. "Family doesn't do this to family." The irony of that statement was so thick, I almost choked on it. "Family," I repeated slowly. "Family doesn't try to force their widowed sister out of her home 9 days after her husband's funeral. Family doesn't bring a moving truck and make arrangements without permission. Family doesn't call her a gold digger and tell her she's disrespecting the memory of the man she loved. You're right, Tom. Family doesn't do those things. But you did. All of you did." The line went quiet. Then Tom said, his voice smaller, "Claire, that was 2 years ago. We thought we were helping." I laughed, a sound with no humor in it. "You thought you were helping by trying to steal my house? By calling me names when I refused to let you control my life? You didn't want to help me, Tom. You wanted me to be convenient, manageable. And when I wasn't, you all walked away. You didn't call on my birthday. You didn't check in at Christmas. You didn't care if I lived or died as long as I did it somewhere that wasn't your problem." Please take a moment to subscribe if you're enjoying this story. We're building toward 1,000 subscribers, and your support is what makes this channel possible. Click subscribe now and be part of our community. My mother called next, then Jennifer, then Marcus, then my father, who I hadn't heard from since the day he called me dramatic for not wanting to leave my home. They all had variations of the same message. This was cruel. This was unnecessary. This was me holding a grudge and punishing them unfairly. Not one of them apologized. Not one of them acknowledged what they'd done. They simply wanted me to make an exception for family, to charge them less than market rate because of our relationship. I told each of them the same thing. This was business. The rents were fair. They had 60 days to decide if they wanted to stay at the new rate or move. If they chose to move, I'd provide good references and return their security deposits promptly. But the price was the price. I wasn't negotiating. Amanda called last. She was the only one who sounded genuinely remorseful. "Claire," she said, "I know we hurt you. I know we handled everything wrong after David died. But this feels like you're punishing all of us for what Tom and Marcus and Mom and Dad did. I didn't try to kick you out of your house." She was right. She hadn't. She just stood by and watched everyone else do it. She'd called me later and suggested I was overreacting, that I should forgive, but she hadn't actively participated in trying to force me out. "Amanda," I said, "you're right. You didn't try to kick me out. You just let them. You called me later and told me I should get over it. That family is forever. But you never once said they were wrong. You never once stood up for me. You chose a side, and it wasn't mine. So yes, this applies to you too. The rent is the rent." She started crying. "We can't afford this, Claire. Rick is still looking for work. We're barely making it as it is." I felt a pang of sympathy, brief and quickly suppressed. "Then you'll need to find something more affordable," I said. "Just like you all wanted me to do when David died. Remember? Downsize. Get a roommate. Move somewhere more appropriate. I'm sure you'll figure it out. Your family. Family always figures it out." The 60 days passed. Tom and Jennifer moved out, found a smaller apartment in a worse neighborhood, and let me know through a mutual acquaintance that they'd never forgive me. My parents stayed, barely, by cutting their budget to the bone and complaining constantly about having a heartless daughter. Amanda and Rick moved to a studio apartment across town, which meant their kids had to share a bedroom with them. Marcus stayed, paying the increased rent, but sending me monthly text messages about what a terrible person I was. Subscribe to the channel if this story is keeping your attention. We're working hard to reach 1,000 subscribers, and you can help us get there by clicking that subscribe button. It's fast, it's free, and it really helps. I felt conflicted about all of it. There was satisfaction, certainly, in showing them what it felt like to be treated as nothing more than a financial calculation. There was vindication in proving I didn't need them, that I'd not only survived but thrived without their support. But there was also sadness. These were people I'd loved. People who'd been part of my life for decades. And now there was this chasm between us, built from their cruelty and my refusal to pretend it never happened. A year after I bought the building, Amanda reached out again. This time, her tone was different. She asked if we could meet for coffee, neutral territory, just to talk. I almost said no, but curiosity won out. We met at a small cafe downtown, far from Riverside Commons, far from my house, far from our shared history. She looked tired, older than her 34 years, but she also looked determined. "I've been in therapy," she said without preamble, "trying to work through some things. And one of the things I've realized is that I owe you a real apology. Not an 'I'm sorry you're upset' apology. A real one." She took a breath. "What we did after David died was unconscionable. We treated you like a problem to be solved instead of a person who was grieving. We prioritized our discomfort with your situation over your actual needs. And I stood by and let it happen because it was easier than standing up to Mom and Dad and Tom. I was a coward, and I'm sorry. I'm genuinely deeply sorry." I sat there, coffee untouched, processing her words. This was what I'd wanted to hear 2.5 years ago. This acknowledgement, this taking of responsibility. "Why now?" I asked. "Why does it matter now?" She smiled sadly. "Because being on the other side of your judgment made me realize how it felt. To be reduced to your worst moment, to have someone look at you and see only the thing you did wrong, never the whole person. I don't blame you for raising our rent. I don't blame you for treating us like business associates instead of family. We earned that. But I miss my sister. I miss the person who used to call me when something funny happened, who'd come over just to watch bad reality TV, who was one of my best friends. I miss you, Claire. And I'm willing to do whatever it takes to earn my way back into your life, if that's even possible. I want you to subscribe to this channel if you haven't yet. We're almost at 1,000 subscribers, and your support is everything. Click that button and help us reach our goal. It only takes a second. We talked for 3 hours that day. She told me about her therapy, about the work she'd been doing to set boundaries with our parents, about her frustration with Tom's refusal to take any responsibility for his actions. She told me about her kids, about Rick's new job that wasn't as good as his old one but was stable, about the struggles of living in a studio apartment with 2 children. She didn't ask me to lower her rent. She didn't ask me to fix anything. She just talked and listened, and for the first time in almost 3 years, I felt like I was talking to my actual sister instead of a stranger wearing her face. I didn't forgive her that day. Forgiveness isn't a switch you flip, but I left the door open to the possibility. We started meeting once a month, then twice a month. Slowly, carefully, we rebuilt something. Not the relationship we'd had before, because that was based on assumptions that had proven false, but something new. Something more honest. Tom never apologized. Neither did my parents or Marcus. They continued to live in my building, paying market rate rent and complaining about having a vindictive landlord. I heard through Amanda that they'd tried to organize other tenants to complain about me, but it didn't go anywhere because I was actually a good landlord. I kept the building maintained, responded quickly to repair requests, and charged what everyone else in the neighborhood charged. There was nothing to complain about except that they didn't like the person they had to write their rent checks to. 5 years after David died, I stood on the porch of the house my family had tried to force me out of and looked at the life I'd built. I owned 14 rental properties now. My real estate business was thriving. I'd started a small scholarship fund in David's name for kids in the neighborhood who wanted to go into the trades. I'd traveled to Italy and Greece, stayed in that Tuscan villa we'd dreamed about, cried into my wine at a sunset David would never see. I dated briefly, nothing serious, learning to be a person on my own instead of half of a couple. I'd survived. More than survived. I'd built something meaningful from the rubble of the worst moment of my life. Amanda and I had gotten close again, not the same as before, but something real. Her kids called me Aunt Claire and didn't know the full story of why they only saw me and not the rest of the family together. Tom and Jennifer had moved out of state, chasing a job opportunity, and we hadn't spoken in 3 years. My parents still lived in Riverside Commons, still paid their rent on time, still complained about me to anyone who would listen. Marcus I saw occasionally around town, and we'd nod awkwardly before going our separate ways. Hit that subscribe button if you're still listening. We're so grateful for every subscriber who helps us work toward that 1,000 subscriber goal. Your support makes these stories possible, so please subscribe now. The question people always ask when they hear this story is whether I regret it. Whether I regret buying the building, raising the rents, treating my family like business contacts instead of blood relations. The answer is complicated. I regret that it happened at all. I regret that my family showed me who they really were in my darkest moment. I regret that David isn't here to see what I built from the ashes of our life together. But do I regret standing up for myself? Do I regret refusing to let them define my worth? Do I regret building a successful business and treating them with the same consideration they showed me? No. I don't regret that at all. My family wanted me to be convenient. They wanted me to fit into the box they'd built for me, to accept their decisions about my life, to be grateful for whatever scraps of attention they were willing to throw my way. And when I refused, when I stood up and said no, this is my life and I'll live it on my terms, they couldn't handle it. They called me cruel, vindictive, heartless. But the truth is, I just stopped letting them treat me like I didn't matter. The building is still doing well. I've renovated 6 of the units, updated the common areas, installed better security. It's become one of the nicest properties I own. The tenants, including my parents, seem happy despite the market rate rents. They have a landlord who cares about the property and responds to issues. They have a safe, well-maintained place to live. That's the deal. That's all I ever owed them. Sometimes I drive by the building and think about karma, about justice, about whether any of this really means anything in the long run. We're all just people trying to survive, trying to do our best with whatever hand we're dealt. My family dealt me a terrible hand when David died. They took my grief and made it about themselves, their discomfort, their ideas about what I should do. And I took that pain and built something with it. Maybe that makes me vindictive. Maybe it makes me a survivor. Maybe it makes me both. The last time I saw Tom was at a mutual friend's wedding. We were seated at different tables, carefully placed to avoid interaction, but we ended up at the bar at the same time. He looked at me, and I looked at him, and there was this moment where we both acknowledged that we were strangers now. People who shared DNA and history but no affection, no trust, no path forward. "You got what you wanted," he said finally. "You punished us. Are you happy now?" Before you reach the end, please subscribe if you haven't already. We're building something special here, working toward 1,000 subscribers, and you can be part of it. Click that subscribe button. It really makes a difference. I thought about his question. Was I happy? "I'm surviving," I told him. "I'm building a life that matters. I'm honoring David's memory by being strong enough to stand on my own." "That's not about you, Tom." "It never was. You all made it about me being convenient, being manageable, being easy to dismiss. I made it about me being a person with agency and dignity and the right to make my own choices. If that looks like punishment to you, maybe that says more about you than it does about me." Marcus moved out of Riverside Commons 6 months after that conversation. Found a place across town, sent me a formal notice of his intent to vacate, and left without incident. We haven't spoken since. Tom and Jennifer never came back to Riverside after moving out of state. I heard through the grapevine that they'd gone through another bankruptcy, that their marriage was struggling, that life continued to be hard for them. I felt sympathy, but it was distant, abstract, like feeling bad for characters in a movie rather than people I'd once loved. My parents stayed because at their age, moving was more disruptive than just paying the rent. We achieved a kind of cold détente. They paid on time. I maintained the property. We didn't speak beyond necessary landlord-tenant communications. On holidays, I had dinner with Amanda and her family. Sometimes I went out with my real estate investment group or friends from my grief support group, people who knew me as I was now, not as I'd been before David died. I started dating again, seriously this time. His name was Michael, an architect who understood loss because he'd been widowed young too. We took things slow, both of us carrying scars from our first marriages, both of us knowing that love was precious and fragile and worth protecting. He never pushed me to reconcile with my family. He never suggested I was being too hard or too unforgiving. He just listened when I needed to talk and held me when grief came in waves on anniversaries and birthdays and random Tuesdays when a song David loved came on the radio. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. We're building toward 1,000 subscribers, and you're helping us get there. Click that subscribe button and join our growing community. It's fast, it's free, and it means everything. 7 years after David died, I got a call from Amanda. Our father had had a stroke. He was in the hospital, stable but changed, part of his body paralyzed, his speech affected. Did I want to come see him? I thought about it for a long time. Thought about the father who'd called me dramatic, who'd stood in my driveway and tried to force me from my home, who'd never once apologized or acknowledged the harm he'd caused. Thought about the father who'd taught me to ride a bike, who'd walked me down the aisle at my wedding, who'd been a presence in my life for 37 years before everything fell apart. I went to the hospital. He was in a room on the 4th floor, my mother sitting beside his bed looking older and smaller than I remembered. She saw me walk in and started crying immediately, but she didn't speak. My father looked at me, his eyes sharp even though half his face drooped, and I saw recognition there. Saw something that might have been regret, or might have been just the aftermath of a major medical event. I pulled up a chair. "I'm not here to forgive you," I said quietly, making sure he could hear me. "I'm not here to pretend the last 7 years didn't happen. But I'm here because despite everything, you're still my father. And I'm still the person David loved, the person who believes you show up even when it's hard. So I'm showing up. But this doesn't erase anything. This doesn't fix anything. This is just me being present in this moment because that's who I choose to be. He couldn't respond, not really, but his eyes filled with tears. My mother reached across the bed like she wanted to touch my hand, then thought better of it. We sat in silence for a while, the three of us, surrounded by the beeping of monitors and the smell of disinfectant. Eventually, I left, told them I'd check in with the doctors, make sure they had everything they needed. Walked out of that hospital room carrying the same boundaries I'd walked in with, but feeling lighter somehow, like showing up had been for me, not for them. My father recovered partially, moved to a rehabilitation facility, then back to Riverside Commons with home health care support. My mother had to cut back their expenses even more to afford the medical bills. I didn't lower their rent. I did connect them with a social worker who helped them access programs they qualified for, resources that actually address their needs rather than just asking me to subsidize their lives. It was the kind of help they should have offered me 7 years ago. Practical, respectful of boundaries, focused on solutions rather than guilt. The scholarship fund expanded. We were giving out 10 awards a year now, fully funding trade school or community college for kids who wanted to work with their hands the way David had. The program had a waiting list. I'd partnered with local contractors to offer internships, created a mentorship program matching students with experienced tradespeople. It was becoming something bigger than I'd imagined, something that honored David's memory by creating opportunities rather than just preserving the past. Before we wrap up, please hit that subscribe button. We're working hard to reach 1,000 subscribers, and you can help us get there. Your subscription matters. Click now and be part of what we're building. Riverside Commons was fully renovated now, every unit updated, the building one of the most desirable properties in the neighborhood. Waiting list for units. Great tenant retention. My parents' apartment had been updated too, new appliances and flooring, better accessibility features after my father's stroke. They paid for those updates through their rent like everyone else, but they benefited from them all the same. That was the deal. That was always the deal. Fair treatment in exchange for fair payment. Nothing more, nothing less. Michael and I got engaged on a Tuesday because Tuesdays had always been significant. The day David died. The day I learned how quickly life could change. The day I decided to make new memories that honored the past without being trapped by it. We got married in a small ceremony at my house, the one my family had tried to take from me, with Amanda as my only family member present. Her kids were flower girl and ring bearer. It was perfect because it was honest. No pretending we were a big, happy family. No forcing reconciliation for the sake of appearances. Just the people who'd earned the right to be there. Tom sent a card. Didn't sign it, but I recognized the handwriting. It said, "I hope you find happiness." No apology. No acknowledgement. Just a generic sentiment that could mean anything or nothing. I threw it away. Some bridges, once burned, aren't worth rebuilding. Some relationships end not with drama, but with silence, with the quiet recognition that people grow apart, and sometimes they're meant to. My mother came to the wedding. Didn't ask permission, just showed up at the house an hour before the ceremony. Amanda had mentioned it to her, not inviting her exactly, but not hiding it either. She stood at the back, didn't speak to anyone, left before the reception. But she came. I saw her there, and I felt nothing. Not anger, not satisfaction, not sadness. Just the neutral acknowledgement that this person who'd given birth to me had shown up to watch me marry someone who actually chose me, who actually valued me, who actually stood beside me instead of trying to manage me. Marcus moved out of Riverside Commons 6 months after that conversation. Found a place across town, sent me a formal notice of his intent to vacate, and left without incident. We haven't spoken since. Tom and Jennifer never came back to Riverside after moving out of state. I heard through the grapevine that they'd gone through another bankruptcy, that their marriage was struggling, that life continued to be hard for them. I felt sympathy, but it was distant, abstract, like feeling bad for characters in a movie rather than people I'd once loved. My parents stayed because at their age, moving was more disruptive than just paying the rent. We achieved a kind of cold détente. They paid on time. I maintained the property. We didn't speak beyond necessary landlord-tenant communications. On holidays, I had dinner with Amanda and her family. Sometimes I went out with my real estate investment group or friends from my grief support group, people who knew me as I was now, not as I'd been before David died. I started dating again, seriously this time. His name was Michael, an architect who understood loss because he'd been widowed young too. We took things slow, both of us carrying scars from our first marriages, both of us knowing that love was precious and fragile and worth protecting. He never pushed me to reconcile with my family. He never suggested I was being too hard or too unforgiving. He just listened when I needed to talk and held me when grief came in waves on anniversaries and birthdays and random Tuesdays when a song David loved came on the radio. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. We're building toward 1,000 subscribers, and you're helping us get there. Click that subscribe button and join our growing community. It's fast, it's free, and it means everything. 7 years after David died, I got a call from Amanda. Our father had had a stroke. He was in the hospital, stable but changed, part of his body paralyzed, his speech affected. Did I want to come see him? I thought about it for a long time. Thought about the father who'd called me dramatic, who'd stood in my driveway and tried to force me from my home, who'd never once apologized or acknowledged the harm he'd caused. Thought about the father who taught me to ride a bike, who'd walked me down the aisle at my wedding, who'd been a presence in my life for 37 years before everything fell apart. I went to the hospital. He was in a room on the 4th floor, my mother sitting beside his bed looking older and smaller than I remembered. She saw me walk in and started crying immediately, but she didn't speak. My father looked at me, his eyes sharp even though half his face drooped, and I saw recognition there. Saw something that might have been regret, or might have been just the aftermath of a major medical event. I pulled up a chair. "I'm not here to forgive you," I said quietly, making sure he could hear me. "I'm not here to pretend the last 7 years didn't happen. But I'm here because despite everything, you're still my father. And I'm still the person David loved, the person who believes you show up even when it's hard. So I'm showing up. But this doesn't erase anything. This doesn't fix anything. This is just me being present in this moment because that's who I choose to be." He couldn't respond, not really, but his eyes filled with tears. My mother reached across the bed like she wanted to touch my hand, then thought better of it. We sat in silence for a while, the three of us, surrounded by the beeping of monitors and the smell of disinfectant. Eventually, I left, told them I'd check in with the doctors, make sure they had everything they needed. Walked out of that hospital room carrying the same boundaries I'd walked in with, but feeling lighter somehow, like showing up had been for me, not for them. My father recovered partially, moved to a rehabilitation facility, then back to Riverside Commons with home health care support. My mother had to cut back their expenses even more to afford the medical bills. I didn't lower their rent. I did connect them with a social worker who helped them access programs they qualified for, resources that actually address their needs rather than just asking me to subsidize their lives. It was the kind of help they should have offered me 7 years ago. Practical, respectful of boundaries, focused on solutions rather than guilt. The scholarship fund expanded. We were giving out 10 awards a year now, fully funding trade school or community college for kids who wanted to work with their hands the way David had. The program had a waiting list. I'd partnered with local contractors to offer internships, created a mentorship program matching students with experienced tradespeople. It was becoming something bigger than I'd imagined, something that honored David's memory by creating opportunities rather than just preserving the past. Before we wrap up, please hit that subscribe button. We're working hard to reach 1,000 subscribers, and you can help us get there. Your subscription matters. Click now and be part of what we're building. Riverside Commons was fully renovated now, every unit updated, the building one of the most desirable properties in the neighborhood. Waiting list for units. Great tenant retention. My parents' apartment had been updated too, new appliances and flooring, better accessibility features after my father's stroke. They paid for those updates through their rent like everyone else, but they benefited from them all the same. That was the deal. That was always the deal. Fair treatment in exchange for fair payment. Nothing more, nothing less. Michael and I got engaged on a Tuesday because Tuesdays had always been significant. The day David died. The day I learned how quickly life could change. The day I decided to make new memories that honored the past without being trapped by it. We got married in a small ceremony at my house, the one my family had tried to take from me, with Amanda as my only family member present. Her kids were flower girl and ring bearer. It was perfect because it was honest. No pretending we were a big, happy family. No forcing reconciliation for the sake of appearances. Just the people who'd earned the right to be there. Tom sent a card. Didn't sign it, but I recognized the handwriting. It said, "I hope you find happiness." No apology. No acknowledgement. Just a generic sentiment that could mean anything or nothing. I threw it away. Some bridges, once burned, aren't worth rebuilding. Some relationships end not with drama, but with silence, with the quiet recognition that people grow apart, and sometimes they're meant to. My mother came to the wedding. Didn't ask permission, just showed up at the house an hour before the ceremony. Amanda had mentioned it to her, not inviting her exactly, but not hiding it either. She stood at the back, didn't speak to anyone, left before the reception. But she came. I saw her there, and I felt nothing. Not anger, not satisfaction, not sadness. Just the neutral acknowledgement that this person who'd given birth to me had shown up to watch me marry someone who actually chose me, who actually valued me, who actually stood beside me instead of trying to manage. 3 weeks after the wedding, my mother called. Not on my birthday this time. Not with an agenda about rent. Just called. "I watched you get married," she said. "You looked happy. Really happy. The kind of happy I haven't seen since before David died. And I realized, standing there watching you, that I could have been part of that. Could have been someone you wanted there, someone you included, someone who mattered to you. But I threw that away. We all did. And I'm sorry. I'm genuinely, deeply sorry for what we did to you when David died. For trying to take your home. For treating you like a burden instead of a daughter who was suffering. For all of it. Make sure you're subscribed if you're still listening. We're almost at 1,000 subscribers, and you're helping make that happen. Click subscribe now. It's quick, it's easy, and it supports the channel. I sat with her words for a long moment. This was the apology I'd wanted 7 years ago. But 7 years is a long time. 7 years of building a life without them. 7 years of learning I didn't need their approval or validation. 7 years of becoming someone stronger, harder, more self-sufficient. Thank you for saying that. I told her finally. I genuinely mean that. I'm glad you've gotten to a place where you can acknowledge what happened. But Mom, this doesn't change anything. The relationship we had died the day you all tried to force me out of my home. What exists now is something different. Smaller. More honest, maybe, but not what it was. And I'm okay with that. I hope eventually you will be too. She was quiet for a long time. Then, "Can I ask you something?" I waited. "Do you think you'll ever forgive us? Really forgive us?" I thought about David, about what he would have said. He'd always been better at forgiveness than I was, quicker to let things go, slower to hold grudges. But he'd also been fiercely protective of me, and I knew without doubt he would have been furious at what my family did. He would have stood between me and them, would have made sure I knew I was worth fighting for. "I don't know," I said honestly. "Maybe someday. Maybe never. Forgiveness isn't something I can force or fake. Right now, I'm at peace with how things are. I'm not angry anymore. I don't wish bad things for any of you. But I also don't trust you. I don't need you. And I don't particularly want you in my life beyond the basic civility we've managed. If that changes, it changes. But it's not going to change because you want it to, or because enough time has passed. It'll change if and when I'm ready. And I might never be ready." She accepted that more gracefully than I expected. Maybe her own therapy, maybe age, maybe just exhaustion at fighting a battle she'd already lost. We ended the call without drama, without declarations, just two people who'd said what needed to be said and were moving forward separately. 10 years after David died, I stood at his grave on a cold October morning. I came every year on the anniversary, not out of obligation, but because I wanted to tell him about the life I'd built, the business that was thriving, The man I'd married who made me laugh and held me when I cried and never tried to replace what David and I had but created something new alongside it. I bought another building, I told the headstone. 40 units this time. Biggest project yet. Scared out of my mind, but also excited. You'd be proud, I think. Or maybe you'd tell me I'm crazy for taking on so much. Probably both. I told him about the scholarship fund, about the kids we were helping, about the young woman who'd just completed her electrical engineering degree and was already getting job offers across the state. Told him about Amanda's kids, who were growing up fast and didn't know the family drama that had defined their early years. Told him about Tom and Jennifer's divorce, about Marcus's second bankruptcy, about my parents aging in their apartment in my building, still paying their rent, still maintaining our cold distance. Subscribe if you haven't already. We're so close to 1,000 subscribers, and every single one matters. Click that button right now and help us reach our goal. Be part of this community we're building together. They never really got it, I said to the grave. Never understood that it wasn't about the money or the building or even the rent.
It was about respect.
About being treated like a person instead of a problem. About standing up and saying, no, you don't get to decide my worth. I do. The wind picked up, cold and sharp, and I pulled my coat tighter. Michael's good. I continued. Different from you, but good. He knows about you, knows he's not trying to replace you. We have dinner every week with his daughter from his first marriage. She's 16, angry at the world, reminds me of myself at that age. We're figuring it out together. I stayed for an hour, talking and thinking and remembering. Not the painful memories anymore, not the heart attack and the funeral and the aftermath. The good memories. The Tuesday mornings and the pasta dinners and the quiet moments that had made up a life. The laughter and the love and the certainty that I'd been chosen by someone who actually saw me. I survived, I told him finally. You always said I was tougher than I thought. You were right. I survived and I built something and I'm okay. I'm actually okay. I hope wherever you are, you know that. I hope you're proud. A year later, Amanda called with news. Tom had died. Heart attack, just like David. He was 52. The funeral would be the following Saturday. Did I want to come? I felt the ghost of grief, the shadow of what I'd once felt for the brother who taught me to ride a bike and threatened anyone who was mean to me. But it was distant, muted, like mourning someone I used to know rather than someone who is currently in my life. I went to the funeral, sat in the back, didn't speak to Jennifer or my parents. Watched people eulogize a man who'd probably been good in many ways, but had shown me his worst when I needed his best. After the service, Jennifer approached me. She looked exhausted, worn down by years of financial struggle and a failing marriage, and now this. Thank you for coming, she said. It would have meant something to Tom, I think. I nodded. I'm sorry for your loss, I said, the formal phrase that meant everything and nothing. She studied my face for a moment. Are you happy, Claire? After everything, after all this time, did getting revenge on us make you happy? It wasn't accusatory exactly, more genuinely curious. Like she really wanted to know if the price had been worth it. It was never about revenge, I said quietly. It was about survival. About refusing to let you all define who I was, or what I deserved. And yes, I'm happy. Not because of what I did to you all, but because of what I built for myself. The life I created, the business I grew, the person I became. That's what makes me happy. What happened with you all was just the price of admission. The cost of standing up for myself. One more time before we finish. Please subscribe to the channel. We're working toward 1,000 subscribers, and you're helping us get there. Your support is what makes these stories possible, so click that subscribe button right now. She nodded slowly, like she understood even if she didn't agree. We parted without hugging, without promises to stay in touch. Two people who'd once been family, acknowledging that chapter had closed. I drove home to Michael, to the house David and I had built, to the life I'd constructed from the ruins of the one I'd planned. And I felt at peace. Riverside Commons celebrated its 15th anniversary under my ownership last month. 15 years of being a good landlord, of maintaining the property, of charging fair market rates, of treating tenants with respect. My parents still live there, both in their 80s now, both requiring more care. I hired and subsidized a home health aide for them, not as their daughter, but as their landlord accommodating elderly tenants. They never asked why. Maybe they understood it was the kind of practical help they should have offered me all those years ago. Maybe they just accepted it gratefully. We still don't have a warm relationship, but we have something. A mutual understanding, perhaps. A recognition that we're connected by history, if not by affection. Amanda and I meet for coffee every week now. Our relationship has healed as much as it's going to heal. She's been sober for 3 years, working through her own issues, taking responsibility for her part in everything that happened. Her kids are in college now, both of them recipients of scholarships I helped them apply for through programs I knew about for my work. She's never asked me to apologize for raising her rent. I've never asked her to thank me for the help I've given her family in other ways. We just exist together, two sisters who survived a family implosion and found a way to rebuild something smaller but honest. The scholarship fund now serves 3 counties. We've helped over 200 kids get into trades, created a network of alumni who support each other and mentor new students. Michael helped me set up a foundation, ensuring it'll continue long after I'm gone. It's David's legacy, but it's also mine. Proof that grief can be transformed into something generative, that pain can fuel purpose, that surviving isn't just about endurance, but about what you build with the strength you discover in yourself. I think about those 9 days a lot. The 9 days between David dying and my family trying to kick me out. How everything I thought I knew about love and loyalty and family collapsed in that short span of time. How I learned that people will show you exactly who they are when you're at your most vulnerable, and you need to believe them. How I discovered I was capable of surviving things I never thought I could survive. How I built an empire from the ashes of the worst moment of my life. People sometimes ask if I'm proud of what I did. Buying the building, raising the rents, treating my family like any other tenant. The answer is complicated. I'm proud that I stood up for myself. I'm proud that I built a successful business. I'm proud that I didn't let them break me or force me into a smaller life. But I'm also aware of the cost. The family relationships that will never be repaired. The weddings and holidays and ordinary moments we'll never share. The price of self-respect turned out to be isolation from the people I'd known my entire life. Hit subscribe one last time if this story resonated with you. We're so close to 1,000 subscribers, and you're helping us reach that milestone. Click that button now and be part of our community. It really does make a difference to the channel and helps us bring you more stories like this. Would I do it differently if I could go back? I honestly don't know. Maybe I would have handled the conversation about the rent increase differently, been more diplomatic, offered more gradual increases. But the core of it, refusing to give them special treatment, maintaining my boundaries, building a life that didn't include people who'd abandoned me, no. I wouldn't change that. Because here's what I learned in those dark months after David died. You teach people how to treat you. And if you let them steamroll you once, they'll do it again. And again. Until there's nothing left of you except what they think you should be. I chose differently. I chose me. I chose the house David and I built together. I chose to honor his memory by being strong instead of convenient. I chose to build a business that provided good housing while also holding people accountable to market realities. I chose to help people who actually needed help, like the scholarship recipients, rather than subsidizing people who just wanted to avoid consequences. I chose boundaries over false peace. I chose authentic distance over fake closeness. And yes, I chose to make my family pay market rate to live in a building I owned. Was it petty? Maybe. Was it justified? I think so. Was it necessary? Absolutely. Because if I'd given in, if I'd charged them less than market rate out of some misguided sense of family obligation, I would have been telling them, and telling myself, that what they did was okay. That you can treat people terribly when they're vulnerable and still expect favors. That family means never facing consequences for your actions. And I refuse to send that message. The real estate investment group I belong to likes to use my story as a cautionary tale and an inspiration. Cautionary because mixing business with family is almost always a disaster. Inspirational because I took a devastating situation and turned it into a thriving business. They don't know all the details, don't know about the 9 days or the moving truck or the exact words my brother used when he told me I needed to leave my home. But they know I bought a building where my family lived and raised the rents to market rate. And every single one of them, when they hear that, nods in understanding. Because in business, you can't make exceptions for family. Not if you want to succeed. Not if you want to maintain your integrity. Not if you want to sleep at night knowing you treated everyone fairly. Michael understands all of it. He's met my parents exactly twice, both times briefly at neutral locations. He's close with Amanda and her family. He knows the whole story, every painful detail, and he's never once suggested I should handle it differently. You survived, he told me once. You built something meaningful from tragedy. You stood up for yourself when no one else would stand up for you. That's not something to apologize for. That's something to be proud of. He was right. I am proud. Complicated, conflicted, sometimes guilty, but ultimately proud. If you made it to the end of this story, thank you for listening. And please, one final time, subscribe to the channel. We're working toward 1,000 subscribers, and you're helping us build this community. Click that subscribe button right now. It's the last thing I'll ask, and it means everything. The house where this all started still stands. Still mine. Still filled with memories of David, and now new memories with Michael. The rooms where my family once gathered are now spaces where different people create different traditions. The porch where Tom stood and told me I needed to leave is where I sit every morning with my coffee, watching the neighborhood wake up, planning my day, living the life I fought to keep. Some people drive by and see just a house. I see a fortress, a line in the sand, the place where I learned exactly how strong I needed to be. Riverside Commons will probably remain in my portfolio until I retire. It's a good property, well-maintained, profitable. My parents will likely live there until they can't anymore, and I'll continue to be their landlord, professional and distant and fair. When they're gone, maybe I'll feel differently. Maybe grief will soften the hard edges of this story. Or maybe I'll just feel relief that a complicated chapter has finally closed. Time will tell. What I know for certain is this. I survived the worst thing I thought could happen to me. And then I survived my family's attempt to make it worse. And I didn't just survive, I thrived. I built a business, created a legacy, found love again, made peace with the past while refusing to be defined by it. The girl who got kicked out of her house 9 days after her husband died became the woman who owned the building her family lived in and charged them market rate without apology. Some people will read that as a revenge story. Others will read it as justice. I read it as survival. And if my family ever wants to know whether I'm happy with how everything turned out, whether I think the price of standing up for myself was worth paying, whether I regret any of it, they can ask. My answer will be honest. My answer will be clear. My answer will be everything they should have heard 10 years ago but weren't ready to accept.